Hello and welcome to another video. Just over a year ago, I was in the market for a single dosing coffee grinder. I wanted it to have a stepless grind adjustment and solid build quality as well as an interesting design. It wasn't long before I came across the Lagom P64, which seemed to fit the bill. Lagom is a Swedish word which translates to not too much, not too little, but just the right amount. Developed by a company named Option-O, the Lagom P64 is aimed at the home coffee enthusiast. It is a 64mm flat bar grinder designed for single dosing, which is capable of producing the grind level required for anything from pour over to espresso. In this video, I'll discuss the features, my workflow and my overall impressions of the grinder and decide whether or not Option-O have achieved their design aims. Timestamps are available as always if you prefer to skip to a different section. I've been blown away by the support from my previous video, which far exceeded my expectations. If you enjoy this video, please do remember to press the like and subscribe button as more videos will be coming along soon and this helps my channel to grow and reach a wider audience. So in the box there's obviously the grinder itself and some accessories. A dosing cup, an RDT spray bottle, a Weiss distribution tool, a funnel for a 58mm portafilter basket, a grounds catcher and a silicone band. The dosing cup has a capacity of up to 26 grams of beans. The glass RDT bottle is quite small but it's of good quality and lasts me a few weeks before needing refilled. The Weiss distribution tool and the portafilter are both finished in the same anodized aluminium as the grinder, which is a nice touch. The silicone band is there to aid with gripping to the top section to unscrew it if it's too tight, but I can't say this is a problem that I have faced. I'll go over my workflow and how I use the included items later in the video. All you have to do is plug in the power cable and the grinder is ready to use. You can either use the included grounds catcher that sits above the portafilter holder, or you can use the fork to hold and grind directly into your 58mm portafilter basket. It's available in silver, which I have here, or it can be finished in black for an extra $50. This cylindrical anodized aluminium grinder has a very interesting design aesthetic. It's CNC machined from 6061 aluminium, which is then anodized. This is the same aluminium alloy that Apple uses for their products and is also used in the automotive and aviation industry. The choice of materials and the quality of the finishing gives the P64 a reassuring sense of solidity. You'll definitely notice the heft as you take it out of the box, as it weighs 17.2 pounds or 7.8 kilograms. This helps stabilize the grinder and it definitely won't move around on your countertop during use. Lagom states that all the critical parts are machined to a tolerance of less than 10 microns and it definitely feels that way. I can see why they confidently make the claim that this is a grinder that should last decades if cared for properly. The design is clean and modern looking and I like that it doesn't look like a standard grinder or a mundane kitchen appliance. I'm a big fan of anodized aluminium products in general, but this is one of my favourite aesthetically speaking. It has definitely been a talking point when friends have visited. If you're like me and value design and high quality materials, the P64 will not be a disappointment. One thing to note is that on my example there are very small gaps between the body of the grinder and the base plate. I'd prefer if this was flush, but I only noticed it when I filmed this video, so I'm not too bothered by it. It has a compact footprint as there is no large hopper increasing the height. It should fit comfortably in most kitchens, even if it's below a cabinet. The beans are loaded via an opening at the top of the grinder, which is 58mm in diameter and it's a shallow funnel. This piece can simply be pulled off to reveal the concealed anti-popcorn filter, which you're able to remove if you wish. I've kept it on though as I think it's effective and I don't see any benefit to removing it. The large section below has two functions. Internally, it acts as a second, much larger and wider funnel to direct your beans to a small aperture in the center of the 64mm flat bars, and externally it is used to control the dial for your grind settings. Option-O claims that the larger internal funnel has a capacity of 40 grams, which I can confirm it does comfortably. If you need to grind more than 40 grams of coffee at once, you can just continually feed the grinder whilst it's running for up to 20 shots worth of coffee. Any more than that, an Option-O recommends you cycle the power on and off for 30 seconds at a time. I suspect this is to prevent overheating. The grind setting is adjusted by simply rotating the top section clockwise to grind finer and vice versa. On my version, the numbers increase as you set the burrs to grind finer, which is the opposite of what most people are used to. Having said that, the latest pictures on their website show images where this is reversed and the numbers decrease as the grind size is set finer. Each grinder is individually calibrated and marked with an indicator to show the point at which the flat bars touch one another. You obviously want to avoid running the grinder when the bars are touching, as this will cause them to rub together and cause unnecessary wear. Aside from that, you get an RPM adjustment dial which is labelled from 1 to 9 and an on and off button, and that's it. The adjustment is stepless, which enables you to make very small adjustments to grind size and is ideal for espresso making. This smooth mechanism has not too little, not too much, but just the right amount of resistance. You can easily adjust half an increment at a time, and there's enough resistance in the mechanism that you're not at risk of accidentally nudging it and changing your desired setting. The whole top section is threaded internally and simply unscrews to give you access to the inside of the grinder. This reveals the elegant two-piece adjustment mechanism and then the 64mm flat burr set which lies below it. As you adjust the grind setting finer, the top part gradually descends downwards. This pushes on a solid piece of machined aluminium that has the top, non-rotating part of the flat burr set on the bottom side of it. This solid piece is suspended by 3 pre-tension pins which also act as a counter resistance to the top part that is pressing down on it, allowing for extremely small changes in grind size to take place. Each small increment adjusts the grinder burrs by 10 microns or 0.01mm vertically, which I just think is an amazing stat and a crazy level of precision. This design combined with the machining tolerances means that the alignment is essentially fixed, meaning you can open and reassemble the grinder as much as you please without having to worry about it needing to be realigned. This gives you peace of mind that you can easily clean the grinder or change out the burr set if your coffee preferences change over time. Below this mechanism is the bottom part of the burr set, which is the part which rotates when the grinder is operating. The centrifugal forces and gravity send the ground coffee through the exit chutes and down the external chute out and into your portafilter basket or grounds catcher. The clever integration of the 2 bean funnels, popcorn filter, grind adjustment and part of the burr set into just a few pieces of aluminium that then seamlessly integrates into the cylindrical design language of the grinder as a whole with essentially perfect tolerances is just marvelous. To me, this is exactly what good design is all about. I find myself looking in and cleaning the grinder way more than I need to just because I'm so impressed by it. One of the main attractions of single-dose coffee grinding for home use is the lack of significant retention. This can greatly reduce coffee waste, and this allows you more flexibility if you want to try different coffee beans regularly. Retention is never going to actually be zero. A small amount will always be retained, but the P64 and other grinders like it are designed to be as close as possible to zero as they can make it. Option-O claim that if you use the RDT aerosol, retention will be less than 0.1 grams, and without it will be less than 0.2 grams. I tested this with my Akai Lunar Scale. With the RDT spray, I got the exact same weight out as I put in. Without it, I got a figure of 0.1 gram less than I put in. Obviously, even with RDT, there's some retention, which would be picked up if my scale went to more than 1 decimal place, but this is still a very low amount of retention and does live up to Option-O's claim figures, which is great to see. After a period of break-in, the manual says that RDT is optional. I tend to use it anyway, just because it reduces static and that makes distribution and puck preparation slightly easier. From a workflow efficiency perspective, I like that you can pre-weigh your coffee dose and be sure that what you put in is going to be very close to the same weight as you get out. This allows for more accuracy when you're dialing in your espresso, as it's one less variable to worry about. They have opted for a 64mm flat burr set. 4 different burr options are available from the factory, which are all suitable for any coffee from pour over to espresso. However, some burrs excel for certain roasts or brewing methods. Option-O have a really helpful flowchart on their website to help you decide what suits you best. I exclusively drink espresso-based drinks and prefer a high mouthfeel and enjoy varying levels of roasts, so I went with the SSP high uniformity burrs. Do bear in mind that they charge an extra $110 for the SSP burrs over the standard burr set. I think that versatility is a really strong point of the P64. You can start with whichever burr set you find most appealing and change these out easily for a different set at a later date if your preferences change. Since the grinder has toolless access and the alignment is permanent, all you need is a flathead screwdriver to change the burr set. One word of warning though, the top and bottom burrs are slightly different, so don't get that mixed up if you are to change them. The RPM dial is simply labelled from 1 to 9 and can be adjusted whilst the grinder is on or off. The higher the number, the faster the RPM. Numbers 1 to 9 correspond to 200 to 1400 RPM as displayed in this table. I'm not sure why they didn't just put the RPM values on the dial itself. My guess is that this was an aesthetic choice. I must confess that I don't change RPM very often. For all intents and purposes, I found that increasing the RPM with the same bean and grind setting just resulted in a longer extraction time. Practically speaking, this likely just means that the higher RPM results in more fines being generated during the grinding process. In theory, this gives you more customizability over your espresso extraction for particularly difficult beans. Sometimes even a small adjustment in grind size of half a step is the difference between the shot running too quickly or slowly, and in that situation you may be better served by adjusting the RPM setting instead. Although that's not a situation I tend to run into that frequently, it's a nice feature to have. For most beans I tend to find a setting that I like and leave it there. This tends to be anywhere between 500 and 900 RPM. I usually buy one roast that I enjoy for day-to-day coffee and then smaller batches of beans to experiment with. I pre-measure these beans into airtight glass containers. I then decant these beans into the provided grounds catcher rather than the dosing cup that comes with the grinder. I do this just because it's larger and it gives the beans more surface area exposure for RDT. I tend to use RDT for reduced retention as well as static. It's worth noting that you can adjust the grind setting as well as the RPM whilst the grinder is running. I prefer to grind directly into my portafilter. If you're using a portafilter, I think it's necessary to use the included funnel. The distance between the exit chute and the portafilter holder is quite far at around 50mm. Finally, I give the top a light tap just to make sure I get the last part of the grind. As you can see, the distribution of the grind is not suitable for tamping at this point. I use a WDT tool to good effect to help remove any clumps and help with distribution before tamping. I did use the included WDT tool for most of last year, but I recently upgraded to one that has pointed rather than hooked edges. Whilst it looks less coordinated, it does perform better than the one with the hooks. The stepless grind adjustment offers such small incremental grind changes that I'm always able to achieve my desired extraction times fairly easily. In reality, most beans that I've tried can be ground so fine that it will completely choke the Linea Mini, which runs at a flat 9-bar profile. Currently, I don't have access to any other coffee grinders. In future, I would like to do a side-by-side performance and taste comparison with competing grinders in this sector of the market. What I can say is that I've tried a lot of different beans from light to dark roasts with the P64 and I've yet to have any issue dialing in a good tasting drink. The grinder is incredibly quiet. From ear height, I measure it at around 30 decibels, and when it's grinding, it's around 55 decibels. I've actually left it on a few times without noticing as it's so quiet when it's not grinding. At the moment, my preference is for medium roasts, and I really enjoy high textured espresso. This grinder, combined with the Linea Mini, achieve this very well, and having this set up at home has been a joy to use every day. I've done a long-term review on the Linea Mini. If you haven't watched this yet, it will appear in a pop-up box, and it will also be linked in the description below. I would like to delve deeper into the world of lighter roasts more in future. I'm pleased that the P64 can handle this with the high uniformity burrs, but it's also nice to have the peace of mind that if I want, I can simply change to a different burr set such as the unimodal if my preferences change over time. As you've probably realised, I'm a big fan of the Lagom P64, and it's kind of a struggle to think of any significant issues. Personally, I have no problem with the grind size numbering. I have had some issues with the portafilter fork, and on my version I would say the design is somewhat flawed. Fork alignment or shape just doesn't always seem to grip the portafilter securely. Several times when I've been grinding, it gradually slides out and falls. It has caused a bit of damage on the base plate of my grinder, which is a shame, and it's definitely a bad start to your morning. On the Option-O website, they have pictures with a different portafilter holder, so it looks like they have updated it. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like I can retrofit this to my grinder. I would have preferred if the portafilter funnel was magnetic, as it's quite easy to knock off. Since the funnel is also quite tall to compensate for the distance between the exit chute and the portafilter basket, I've struggled to find a magnetic one that is tall enough to replace this one. If you have any recommendations, do let me know down in the comments. Finally, I would have liked if they had given more information or guidance on how you might use variation in grind RPM in your workflow, because other than stating that it gives you the ultimate flexibility, it kind of left me guessing as to how I might best utilize this feature. When I put my order in, I had to wait a couple of months for delivery to the UK, and this continues to be the case. It's clear that these grinders are manufactured in batches rather than a large-scale continuous production, which makes sense with a product like this. My shipping estimate was accurate, although it looks like they've started increasing their pre-orders due to customer demand, with the caveat that this might reduce the accuracy of their shipping times. The base price is $1,475 with the standard burr set and $1,585 for any version with the SSP burr set. You may also have to pay import tax depending on where you're located. If you're in the market for a single dose grinder at this price point and you can wait, I would strongly recommend that you consider the Option-O P64. I really enjoy owning mine and would thoroughly recommend it. Single dosing is becoming more popular and more grinders are being released as time goes on, but to me the P64 remains a very competitive option despite the new releases. If money is no concern and you want to eke out every last bit of performance from your espresso beans, then Option-O now offer a 98mm flat burr grinder, the P100. Whilst I suspect this grinder is great and I would love to test it out, I think it will be far into the realms of diminishing returns when it comes to price to performance ratio for everyone other than die-hard enthusiasts with deep pockets. I really do like the direction of Option-O as a company. They clearly pay attention to their customer feedback and focus on incremental improvements to already great products over time. Whilst this is an expensive grinder, in the single dosing for the home enthusiast market, most grinders are 2 to 3 times more expensive than the P64. When you consider the build quality, the very well engineered stepless adjustment, zero retention, toolless access, and ease of swapping out the burrs, combined with great performance and the level of versatility that the P64 offers, it's unlikely to leave you wanting for much more. I can definitely say with confidence that the P64 is way more than just the right amount. Indeed, it's so much more than that. If you've got any questions, leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer them all. I'm curious about you. What grinder do you have? Have you got any products from Option-O? What are your impressions of them? I'll also link to my Marzocco Linea mini video just in case you haven't seen that yet. Thank you very much and have a good day.